They told pioneers the trail to Oregon was golden, a ticket to paradise. But behind that promise waited 2,000 miles of dust, death, and something even darker. 1 in 10 never made it. On this road, the greatest danger was not the wild, it was the person next to you. What drove ordinary families to follow a stranger into deadly desert or to turn neighbors into murderers? This is the story they never wanted you to believe. In August 1845, nearly 1,000 men, women, and children gathered around their wagons, dust rising from the sagebrush flats. Stephen Meek, hair wild and eyes sharp, rode the circuit with a swagger that drew every gaze. He promised a shortcut, 200 miles shaved off the journey, a path few had ever seen. For families bone-tired from weeks of marching, the lure of easier miles was hard to resist. But not everyone trusted Meek. Samuel Parker and Solomon Tetherow, leaders in their own right, warned of unproven trails and the risk of splitting the train. Voices rose in heated argument. Some accused the doubters of cowardice. Others whispered that Meek's bravado masked his ignorance. The debate dragged into the evening, lanterns flickering as the council called for a vote. Each head of household stepped forward, casting a ballot, shortcut, or safety, faith or caution. Mothers clutched children. Men weighed pride against fear. The pressure was plain. Unity meant survival, but so did choosing wisely. When the count was done, Meek's plan carried the day. Cheers and nervous laughter rippled through the camp. Wagons creaked into formation. Oxen prodded forward. The shortcut was no longer a rumor. It was the only way. Behind them, the known trail faded into memory. Ahead, the Blue Bucket Desert waited, its danger still hidden by hope. There was no turning back. Wagons lurched forward into a world stripped of promise. The shortcut became a wasteland of alkali flats, every step grinding hope into dust. Water vanished first. Springs marked on Meek's memory turned out dry, and the crooked river's banks offered only cracked mud. Livestock collapsed in the midday sun, oxen and horses foaming at the mouth, tongues swollen, eyes rolling in panic. Their bodies dotted the trail, some half buried by desperate hands, others left for the vultures. The air tasted bitter, thick with alkali that burned throats raw. Children begged for water, lips bleeding, voices fading. Some hallucinated streams glimmering on the horizon, only to find more dust. Rations ran thin, flour spoiled in the heat, bacon sweated away to grease, and coffee grounds were boiled 3 or 4 times over. Families scraped wagon boxes for crumbs, gnawed on leather, and as days dragged on, butchered the weakest animals for meat. The smell of death clung to everything, a sour mix of sweat, rot, and fear. Arguments broke out over puddles, over rumors of hidden springs. Accusations flew. Someone was hoarding. Someone had led them wrong on purpose. Men stumbled, delirious, some stripping off clothes in the heat, others babbling about rescue that never came. 40 days passed in this purgatory. 24 graves lined the route, shallow pits marked by stones or nothing at all. On Staten's Ridge, the wagon ruts still scar the earth, silent witnesses to the suffering. When the survivors finally staggered into the settlements near the Dalles, they were gaunt, sunburned, and hollow-eyed, barely more than shadows. The shortcut had become a test of endurance, stripping away every illusion of safety, leaving only the raw will to survive. Illness swept through the mission at Waialatpu with a force that felt unnatural. Measles, carried west by wagon trains, struck the Cayuse with a merciless hand. For the white settlers, the disease was brutal but survivable. Most recovered after days of fever. For the Cayuse, it was a death sentence. Bodies of children and elders lined the riverbanks, their families left to mourn in silence. Within weeks, nearly half the Cayuse around the mission had died. The disparity was impossible to ignore. Marcus Whitman, seen by many as a healer, now looked like an agent of death. His medicines, calomel and castor oil, offered little comfort. Some Cayuse who took the bitter calomel grew worse, their mouths burning, their bodies racked by new pains. Rumors began to spread, whispered from lodge to lodge. Whitman's cures were poison. The interpreter, Joe Lewis, fanned the flames, claiming Whitman had confessed to killing with medicine. Each funeral stoked suspicion. Cayuse elders remembered their own laws. When a Tewat, a medicine man, failed, he paid with his life. The mission walls no longer promised sanctuary. Every cough, every grave, was proof that something more than disease had taken root. The air thickened with dread, as if the land itself waited for retribution. Blood soaked the mission floor, but the violence did not end with the dead. Survivors, mostly women and children, were seized as hostages by the Cayuse. For weeks the mission became a prison. Each day brought new dread. Would the captives be ransomed, or would more die? Word of the killings and the hostage crisis spread quickly. Panic gripped the settlements along the Willamette. Volunteers gathered rifles and formed militias, marching east under makeshift banners. The Cayuse, outnumbered and pressed by hunger, agreed to ransom terms. Hudson's Bay Company agent, Peter Skeen Ogden, negotiated the release, trading blankets and supplies for lives. The cost was steep, but most hostages returned alive. Retaliation followed. Settlers demanded vengeance. The Oregon Provisional Government declared war on the Cayuse, sending companies of armed men upriver. Skirmishes flared across the valley, villages burned, and crops were ruined. For 3 years, the territory was locked in a cycle of raids and reprisals. By 1850, 5 Cayuse men surrendered, hoping to spare their people further bloodshed. They stood trial in Oregon City, accused of murder under foreign law. The jury delivered its verdict: guilty. The 5 were hanged, and whether that was justice or scapegoating depended on who told the story. New forts rose on old ground, and the boundary between law and violence blurred. The massacre's echo hardened the territory, setting a pattern of military justice that would haunt the frontier for decades. In September 1857, the Baker-Fancher wagon train had been pinned down for days, ringed by gunfire and dust, their water nearly gone. Then a white flag appeared. John D. Lee rode into camp, his face calm, flanked by men painted as Paiutes. He spoke of mercy. The immigrants could surrender their weapons, trust the local militia, and walk out under safe escort. Children would ride in wagons, wounded tended, everyone else on foot. Desperation drowned out suspicion. Guns were stacked in a wagon, the last line of defense handed over. Lee's voice promised protection, but his eyes gave nothing away. The procession formed, wagons first, then women and children, then the men, each group separated, exposed. Militiamen and disguised riders circled, silent, watching. The immigrants stepped forward, believing the worst was behind them. In that moment, trust became a weapon, and the prairie held its breath, waiting for the signal that would turn hope to horror. The meadow fell silent after the gunfire faded, broken only by the crying of children too young to understand what had happened. Out of more than 120 men, women, and older children, only 17 survived, spared not out of mercy, but because they were considered too small to remember. These orphans were scattered among local families, their names changed, their past erased. For years, the truth stayed buried with the bodies. Local leaders denied responsibility, blaming the Paiutes. Witnesses were warned to keep quiet. Official reports vanished, and the ground where the massacre took place was left unmarked, the shallow graves disturbed by wolves and weather. Decades slipped by before anyone was held to account. In 1877, John D. Lee was brought to the site and executed by firing squad. He was the only one punished, a scapegoat for a crime many had planned and many more had covered up. The silence lingered, heavier than the desert air, as if the land itself refused to forget. Isolation and lawlessness still test the limits of trust, online, on highways, even in small towns. The Oregon Trail's lesson endures. When protection is just a promise, the true threat is not distance or danger. It is the choices we make under pressure. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel for more untold histories.